in Book 3, particularly Cantos 2 and Cantos 4. In Canto 4, as we saw, Ashwapati is standing face to face, the Divine Mother, the Adya Shakti. He has to go to the transcendental world because the power that he wants to bring down has not yet manifested in this creation, has not yet manifested in this universe. And the only power that can bring a new force, new level of consciousness down here is the Divine Mother. This is the executive aspect of the Supreme Divine, and we recognize her as the Divine Mother. And as I always tell my audiences, this is a concession to human language. This is a level where sex distinctions are of no consequence at all. But it is, since it is easy for a human being to look upon the mother as somebody who creates, the creative aspect of the divine we always call as the Divine Mother, the Adya Shakti. This can become sometimes something of a problem to a Western mind because they have this business somehow that God has to be He, only Virgin Mary can be she, but Supreme God has to be He. But as I said, this is trying to limit ourselves to the limitations of the human language. Ultimately, the spiritual life or spiritual reality is a reality which can fully be understood only through experience and not through language. Once we realize this, then we can use language usefully and not be imprisoned by it or misdirected by it. Now, as you see, when Ashwapati reaches that level, the Supreme Mother says, I am pleased that you have come here. Nobody has so far been this far. But whatever you have seen, the glory and the fulfillment is yours. But do not ask for a similar fulfillment to humanity as a whole, because humanity is not yet ready. It will be ready in due course, because after all, this evolution has come up to this point without any guidance. On the surface, it looked like blind evolution. That's what Western science keeps saying. The evolution is blind, and survival of the fittest is the mechanism evolution has used so far. But notice, it's very interesting, what the notion of fit here is changes. So the fittest, according to the most cunning is the fittest. Fittest would generally would believe fittest would be physically strong. It's not true at all. One who has the capacity to blend with the surroundings, one who has the capacity to survive against all odds. So the notion of fittest, survival of the fittest, has changed over times. So just as they normally say the spiritual people do not have well-defined terms, this is also true of scientific terms. The notion of fit, what is fit, also changes according to circumstances. And yet, without any guidance, without any agent who would understand the purpose of evolution, nature has brought us up to this point. There is what is called a prajna. There is a guiding consciousness behind the so-called evolution. Now that man has arrived, and man has the unique capacity of being self-conscious, self-aware, he has the capacity to understand nature's purpose, and if he so wants, he can cooperate with nature's purpose. Vivekananda once said, yoga is nothing but compressing your future evolution of 15, 20 lives in one life. That's all what yoga is. Even if you do not take up conscious yoga, you are all yogis by the virtue of the fact, as I always emphasizing, we are a part of this evolutionary nature, and we are the carriers of the evolutionary impetus, and therefore we can't help being yogis. But if we do not understand the purpose, we grope in the darkness and probably will spend 15, 20 lives. The progress we could achieve within 15, 20 lives, that way we can all compress in one life. This is what yoga is all about. And so the Supreme Mother says that spiritual life is a difficult life, spiritual quest is a difficult quest, And humanity, of course, needs gods. Humanity needs a benefactor. Humanity needs somebody to help humanity. But spiritual life or spiritual truth is the last thing that humanity now, in fact, wants. What humanity wants is minor adjustments with its lives. If the roads are too bad, better roads. If the cars are bad, better cars. If the retirement age is little too early, advanced retirement age. These are some of the minor adjustments. If God came before us and said, "What do you want?" we will say, "Look, I have made a small list somewhere. It will be somewhere in my purse. This is what we would like." Nobody is asking for, spiritual progress. We are still in love with the finite. And this is how humanity will go on and on. It may take a few million years. I am not in a hurry. The Supreme Mother says, I am not in a hurry. I have started this wonderful game, this Leela of playing at hide and seek. The Purusha and the Prakriti played at hide and seek. But Ashwapati is tired. He says, I am represent humanity. Humanity has been waiting for your coming. And everybody says, the avatar has come, please open the door, light the lamps, prepare the pedestal, and then we are all waiting for you. But God's feet go past and we are left as we are. Revolutions come, avatars come, big people come, but this load of suffering on the human back is unmitigated, exactly the same it always was. So therefore finally he says, I have seen a new race of perfect beings, the pioneers of the new race, already waiting in the subtle physical world. And there is a glorious description, if you remember what we read yesterday. The sun-eyed children, he describes them at great length. And finally he says, O Divine Mother, just as man has come after the beast, let a new being emerge out of man. The new being, of course, will not have 4 legs and 4 hands. He will be biologically not different, but he will be different in his consciousness. His consciousness will be of a different kind. And to expedite this, to make this possible, to show to mankind how this new consciousness has to be achieved, please send to earth a representative of yours. This is what Ashwapati had been asking. And the mother finally concedes to his request and says, I will send to earth an emanation of mine, a projection of mine. And these are the words which we concluded yesterday. Since they are very beautiful, very glorious words, I will read that small little paragraph once again before we proceed. This is on page 346, about 4 lines from the top. O strong forerunner, I have heard thy cry. One shall descend and break the iron law, change nature's doom by the lone spirit's power. A limitless mind that can contain the world, a sweet and violent heart of ardent calms, moved by the passions of the gods shall come. All mights and greatnesses shall join in her. Beauty shall walk celestial on the earth. Delight shall sleep in the cloud net of her hair, and in her body, as on his homing tree, immortal love shall beat his glorious wings. A music of griefless things shall weave her charm. The harps of the perfect shall attune her voice. The streams of heaven shall murmur in her laugh. Her lips shall be the honeycombs of God. Her limbs his golden jars of ecstasy. Her breasts the rapture flowers of paradise. She shall bear wisdom in her voiceless bosom. Strength shall be with her like a conqueror's sword, and from her eyes the eternal's bliss shall gaze. A seed shall be sown in death's tremendous hour, a branch of heaven transplant to human soil. Nature shall overleap her mortal step. Fate shall be changed by an unchanging will. This is the promise that the Divine Mother gives Ashwapati. And as a result of this promise, Savitri is born. Now the original story, all that Sri Aurobindo had to start with is this notion that Ashwapati performs a yajna. And the purpose of this yajna is that he had no progeny, he had no children, he had no issues. And he performs this yajna, that's what Vyasa describes. So it's a straightforward story. But Sri Aurobindo has used this story, as you can see, the way he has used it. I've spent about 7 to 8 days now talking mainly about this part, just to give you an idea how the original story has been modified, not modified, has been used as a framework to convey Sri Aurobindo's vision, his idea of the future of man, and so on. In this part, Ashwapati's Yoga, you get answers to questions like Sri Aurobindo's answers, at least, to questions like why are we here, how did the world come about, why are we the way we are, where are we going from here, what is the purpose of life. All these questions have been answered in some detail in this part. So it is not just the description of any yajna, this is in itself a complete, as I said, it's an autobiography of Sri Aurobindo. If Sri Aurobindo you want to know what he did, particularly in Pondicherry, what was it he was doing for 40 years, you get some inkling in his inner life here in this part. And now, it's very interesting, I don't know whether it has occurred to you, Ashwapati wanted a son. All Indian fathers always have wanted sons. And the Divine Mother, without even asking him, gives him a daughter. You notice that? He wants a son. Any Indian father, when he makes a yajna, particularly of that kind, surely he would want a son. But he gets a daughter, Savitri is the daughter born to him. And this is something, part of our story. But the Indian mind somehow, still wants, I don't know whether you are still familiar with the Indian scene on this. There are several people who still commiserate with me because I have 2 daughters and no son. Somehow, when they learn about me, they feel as if I missed something very great. I don't know what it is I have missed, except headaches. The sons are capable of giving. Now, this is where the first part of this book is in 3 parts, and the first part is called Part 1, which consists of 3 books. We have seen these 3 books and how it concludes. Now comes the 4th book, and Part 2 consists once again of books 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. This is Part 2, about 5 books. Now, those who find Savitri difficult and would still like to start reading it with some amount of understanding, I suggest they begin with book 4. Because from book 4, the story gets a human perspective. I'll show you how it is. And therefore you are not suddenly thrown into unfamiliar environment. The experience is not far removed from the experience of ordinary life that you and I live. Take, for example, in book 4, Canto 1, you have a beautiful description of the birth and childhood of the flame being Savitri. Savitri's birth and her childhood are described. Now, Savitri is meant only for people who have a love for poetry. And Sri Aurobindo has indulged in his love for poetry to his heart's satisfaction. In this particular canto, he describes 2 seasons. In all, if you read the Sanskrit epics like Kalidas and Bhavaguti and so on, you have description of various seasons. And it looks as if Sri Aurobindo's favorite seasons were, what would be favorite seasons of an Indian? His favorite seasons are the monsoon, the rainy season, and spring. I don't think many Indians like the summer, but spring and the rainy season. There are beautiful, gorgeous descriptions of the rainy season and the spring. And so because he has to do this, because Savitri is born towards the end of spring. That's when Savitri is born. And as you can see, there is some correspondence. The mother was born on the 21st of February, which is in Indian calendar when spring is about to withdraw and summer is about to come. That's the time. So there is some correspondence to that as well. Now, you should not get the impression Savitri is all about high and mighty up there in the sky. There is nothing for you and me. We are ordinary human beings. How can I ever? That you should not get that impression, particularly from book 4. You take, for example, here, Savitri's birth is described, Savitri's childhood is described, what kind of education she got, that is described, and how she was growing up as a young girl in her father's palace, that is described. And finally, Savitri grows up into a very, very beautiful young woman, but with so much power within her that no young man ever dares come near her and claim her hand. So finally, Ashwapati asks Savitri to go out into the open world and seek her life's companion. Now this again is not something that Aurobindo has concocted. This is part of the original Mahabharata story. He had no freedom in this. But he uses this to great advantage. When he describes Savitri's going out, you get a virtual description of the Aryavarta of that time. How were the towns, how were the villages, how were the forests, how were the hermitages of various kinds of people. All this description you get. And you can see Aurobindo takes as much delight in describing the humdrum affairs of human life as he does describing the great spiritual experiences. In fact, in life, there is no distinction between spiritual and secular. That is a description of the Indian government. That is the division they have created. There is something called a spiritual life and something called secular life. For us, everything about life is spiritual. Once you start to go your journey towards God, everything becomes spiritual. There is nothing non-spiritual. Otherwise, you will have to say, what I do on Sunday mornings or Sunday evenings or what I do in puja rooms, that is spiritual. What I do in the office is non-spiritual. Therefore, I am, all barakhun maaf. Whatever you do in the office, I don't have to be bound myself by anything at all because it is secular. It's not spiritual. This is not the idea. Everything here is spiritual. I'm saying this because normally I spend considerable time talking about book 5 here, which is a glorious book, it's called the Book of Love, where Aurobindo takes great pleasure in describing Savitri's journey, and then he describes the spot in which Savitri and Satyavan meet for the first time, and then how they discover each other, understand each other, and how their love develops, and how the whole thing ends with Savitri and Satyavan entering into what is called Gandharva Vivah. They get married right there. And I describe this, and many people very often tell me, when I announce this, tomorrow I'm going to do this, and I very often say that Savitri is the greatest love poem ever written. Then at the end of it, when I'm about to go away, some people come to me and said, sir, only talk about spiritual things, don't talk about love and things like that. As if love is not spiritual, there is nothing more spiritual in this world than love. Aurobindo says once in a place, he who can love one individual, really love one individual, just one individual, an individual who has been with you, spent her life with you, who has done everything possible for you, even if that person you can love her fully and really, the door of the temple is already half open for you. And so there is nothing, love can be all kinds of things. Love can begin at the physical level. As you grow in your consciousness, it can take you to the highest spiritual level. And so, love ultimately is the only, there are things here written about love. He says, love is the glory that has come from heaven. He says, God's own glory comes here. And when you really can love, you suddenly get transformed. Something in you suddenly develops a link with the infinite. But love is very often deformed, debased here. All these things do happen. But what is not debased on this earth? Is it only love? We have debased religion, we have debased science, we have debased everything. That is the nature of man's consciousness. Give him everything. The first thing he will do is debase it. So same thing he has done about love, and therefore one should not, hesitate or, you know, regard love as something very basic and very physical, and therefore it has no place in the spiritual life. Take, for example, the Radha and Krishna, or the gopis and Krishna. It's my theory that I don't ever think that Radha existed. Radha is a creation of a whole band of medieval Indian saints. Radha stands for a consciousness of absolute surrender to the divine. Surrender of that intensity that nothing in life matters. After all, as you know the Puranas, Radha was not unmarried. Radha was a married woman. Now, what can be greater for a married woman to break all bonds of society and just respond to the call of this divine lover and give up everything and go away? There's a symbolic meaning to it. There are many, many things that bind us down to this world. And the most hardest thing is, what will they think of me? What will my neighbors think of me? What will my community think of me? These are things that bind us. We would like to do many things, but we always are restrained by this fear. What will they think of me? Here is this example of Radha, who has broken all bonds because she is responding to the call of her divine lover. The soul in us is the Radha, and the divine lover is the same for everybody. Gopi is not a woman. Gopi is the nature of a soul. As you know, the mother has a beautiful prayer written called Radha's Prayer, where she talks about each cell of the body, each drop of my blood, is aspiring for you. That is what Radha is. And as you see, this Radha consciousness and her aspiration for the Lord, there is nothing more spiritual than this. And so, what I would like to emphasize is this part here, Cantos books 4 and 5, which I may not be able to do justice to because of shortage of time, are books worth reading, and you should not ever have the feeling, oh, this is a minor part of Savitri, I will only read the spiritual part and not the non-spiritual part. There is nothing non-spiritual about life. Everything can be treated as if it belonged to God. It all depends, when you sweep the room early in the morning, you can do it blaming everybody in the family. Everybody is lazy. I have to do all the work in the house. I have to do the cleaning. I have to do this. I have to do that. That's one attitude. The other attitude, this is a house where God lives, so I am going to do, clean the temple for God. Ultimately, the work is the same, but the attitude determines your entire thing. So it is this attitude of offering of puja. This is what is very important in life, and not exactly what you do. There anybody who does something, a doctor may be doing what looks like public service, but he may be interested in getting money primarily. There was this famous case in Bombay. There used to be a cardiologist, and he won't touch a patient unless 100,000 rupees were first deposited. You have to deposit 100,000 rupees, then he will look at the patient. And when the operation is done, you have to give another 100,000 rupees. And somebody came, poor man, his mother was seriously ill, he didn't have 100,000 rupees. He said, I'll pay you. Today I'll pay you only 50,000. Doctor said, nothing out of 50,000. And this patient got so enraged, he brought a gun and shot at this doctor. Luckily the doctor was saved because this man was lucky, I guess. So there are doctors who do this, but there are doctors who serve the patient as if he were God himself. So it is not the act, it is the attitude behind the act that is important. And if it's the right attitude, there is nothing in life you need dismiss as non-spiritual. As I've always been saying, meditation is only a special time of the day, but if you meditate for half an hour and try to purify your consciousness, make it turn Godwards, And the remaining 23 and a half hours, if you keep completely soiling your consciousness, keeping it open to all kinds of influences which are not good, then whatever you have earned in half an hour, you have lost next morning again. You do not find one step ahead of where you were yesterday, you find yourself 3 steps behind where you were yesterday, because you have spent the 23 and a half hours spoiling this consciousness. So this is the inner attitude of vigilance. If that is right, then I don't think any one of these things is basically non-spiritual. Now, before I go on, there is one question that I need to answer very briefly. Somebody asked me yesterday, why did Sri Aurobindo choose the Savitri story for all this? Why did he not choose the story of Damayanti or story of Draupadi or Sita and so on? Well, why he did it, it's very difficult to say, and I don't think he himself will have a completely satisfactory answer satisfying the person who asked this question. But there is a reason why he chose the Savitri story for this treatment. As you know, when Sri Aurobindo came back to India in 1893, he hardly had any first-hand acquaintance with Indian tradition, Indian stories, Indian Puranas, Mahabharata and so on. And he started studying these things. And when he studies these things, Sri Aurobindo always used, he used to make something of this. The way he studied Upanishads was by trying to translate the Upanishads. The way he started studying the Mahabharata, he would translate the Mahabharata. Like that, he started doing these things. And at one point, he was fascinated by this story, in which there are 3 characters always. One is death, the other is love, and the third is earth. Earth, death, and love. The idea being, love wants to manifest itself, find its fulfillment here on earth, but death always comes as a negative influence, always denies love the chance to manifest itself. This is the story in Savitri also. As you know, Savitri and Satyavan meet, but Satyavan is destined to die in 1 year, and he dies in fact. So the opportunity for love to manifest on earth is denied. There are 2 other stories of a similar kind that Sri Aurobindo tried his hand at. One is called Urvashi. This is a long poem in his, just as you and I play cards or may read newspaper articles to entertain ourselves, to relax. Sri Aurobindo's relaxation in his Baroda days was to write long poems. Whenever he was free, he would sit down and write long poems. And one of the poems he wrote was Urvashi, and the other poem is called Love and Death. And the third poem he began at that time was Savitri. Now, all these 3 poems have the same theme, with one difference. You see, in Urvashi, this is the story of Vikram Urvashi in Kalidas, where Pururavas falls in love with this heavenly damsel called Urvashi. And after some time, Urvashi goes back from where he comes from, and Pururavas, distraught, he goes around looking for her everywhere and finally finds her in the heavens. And the gods make a compact with him, a contract, an agreement. He says, we will give you Urvashi, provided you are willing to give up your life on earth. That is, choose between earth and Urvashi. And the Pururavas chooses Urvashi, abandons earth. That is, the moral of this story is, if you want fulfillment of love, you can't have it on earth. You can only have it somewhere else. That's a beautiful poem. It's still available. You can see in the complete works. There is another story called, as I said, Love and Death, another poem, where he talks about Priyamvada and Ruru. Now here what happens is, once again, Ruru and Priyamvada are lovers, and they are living happily together, when one day a serpent bites Priyamvada, and Priyamvada is dead, but her soul has gone down to the Patala. And Ruru, once again, like a distraught lover, looks for her everywhere, doesn't find her anywhere, finally goes to Patala. And the lords of Patala, once again make an agreement with him. All right, we'll give you back your Priyamvada, provided you are willing to sacrifice half your lifespan on earth. Are you willing to do that? He says, yes. Now, in one case, the whole of his life on earth is sacrificed, In another case, half of it is sacrificed. Notice once again, it means love in its fullness can never find manifestation on earth. Now love is not merely love, love in the sense it's attraction between man and woman. Love here stands for all positive fulfillment of love. That's what love stands for. Love symbolizes, death symbolizes everything that is negative, and love is a force which is the opposite of death. That's what love is. In the story of Savitri, however, Savitri gets back Satyavan, but without any compromise. Savitri, that means, in this story, Sri Aurobindo saw the scope for, for talking adequately about his ideal. His ideal is fulfillment. If at all we want fulfillment, that fulfillment has to be found here on earth. And so, Savitri's story, Savitri gets fulfillment, Savitri gets back Satyavan without sacrificing even one day of her life on earth. This is the great strength of the Savitri story, and Sri Aurobindo saw this potential, and as I said, he didn't write it at one go, nor did he keep revising it as we normally do. When we revise things, we take the original manuscript and add lines to it or change it. He didn't do it. He rewrote the whole of Savitri. Each time he found himself ascending on a higher level of consciousness. In the beginning, it was hardly 3 cantos. Now what you have, 49 cantos. The original Savitri had only 3 cantos. Gradually it becomes 7 cantos, 9 cantos, 15 cantos, like that. And when finally the book was more or less finished, there was a jungle of manuscripts. Not one, but some of the cantos had 12 to 13 different forms. And by that time, Sri Aurobindo's eyesight had become very weak, and Nirod Baran had to read it. Sri Aurobindo would keep it all in his memory, and then we'll choose this part from the first version, that part from the second version. That's how the whole thing has been put together. So this is the way Savitri has been written, and as I said, Sri Aurobindo said, I didn't mean Savitri to be written and finished. I undertook it as an experiment to see to what extent the English language lends itself to the expression of the highest yogic experience. And so he said, as far as I am concerned, I am primarily writing it for myself. I have no intention of making it a bestseller and seeing that everybody reads it, and so that was not the idea. He just wanted to see an experiment to what extent a language like English, which has not ever been used for this purpose, no language has ever been used for this purpose after Sanskrit in the Vedic times, because the kinds of experience that Sri Aurobindo talks about here are equivalent in many ways to the experiences expressed in the Vedas. And English language is very rich in many fields, but it is not particularly rich when it comes to the expression of spiritual experiences. And so he had to do this. This is about, I said this because as I told you, somebody, the gentleman who asked this question, he is not here unless he's sitting there. Yesterday he was sitting there, he must have come late. This is the reason why he took up the Savitri story, and this is the way he went about writing it. Okay. Now, I just want to read a little bit from 4 cantos so that you can get the hang of it all and see how Sri Aurobindo treats themes like description of, when I did it in Pondicherry last year, it was very interesting to compare this with Kalidas, because Sri Aurobindo's sensuousness, Sri Aurobindo is also as sensuous as Keats. In English, Keats is supposed to be the most sensuous poet. He is as sensuous as Keats, as sensuous as Kalidas. But there is a difference between Sri Aurobindo's sensuousness and the sensuousness of all other things, and this can be easily seen. In Kumarasambhavam, there is a scene where nature, spring is described, because in this season, Shiva is being wooed. So the whole thing is described, and spring beautifully described. And the description that Sri Aurobindo gives here of the spring season reminds you of Kalidas, but it is the overall tone and the vibration is of a different kind. In Kalidas, the vibration is earthly. It's of this earth, as it were. Here, the description is sensuous, but it doesn't have the kind of earthly vibrations. This thing has a totally different kind of vibration. Now, sensuousness, once again, is something that you must be careful about. Now, sensuousness simply means that your senses are very well trained. Your senses can grasp beauty. And one of the functions of education, if your child is properly to be educated, his senses must be properly educated. If the senses are not educated, he will grow up dead to the beauty of nature. Only a sensuous man can suddenly hear a cuckoo singing, or he can suddenly see a swallow, or he can suddenly see flowers. If you are dead, your companion says beautiful flowers. You hardly look at, say, very beautiful. England is beautiful flowers, and you just go. And a walk in England, in the Lake Districts or in the Wales and so on, particularly in summer, it's a gorgeous experience because there's so much there. But if your senses have not been trained, you have lost all this. And I have experiences of this kind where we go to the Himalayas once a year, and Tara Jauhar has these camps for children and so on. And so there was this team which came from Bombay, spoke excellent English, they win all quiz tests and everything. They're very smart boys. One morning she said, we'll all go, we'll give you packed, have your lunch, breakfast, and we'll give you packed lunch. You have to go to a place called China Peak. China is not China. China is the name of a kind of grass, it seems. It used to grow there, so it's called China Peak. So it's a long trek, about 15, 16 kilometers. This is the way to go. You have leaders. You go leisurely, go and see the peak, enjoy yourselves, have your lunch after you reach there, and come back home by about 5 o'clock. So they had time between 9 and 5, the 8 hours. These boys started, reached China Peak by 10:30, opened their lunch boxes and finished their lunch by 11 o'clock, came back, reached by 12:30. Oh, we done it. The whole purpose of this walk was to enjoy yourself, enjoy the nature. This is very dull. It's very boring. There is, because their senses have not been trained. So sensuousness is not something to be rejected. Shakespeare's sensuousness, Kalidasa's sensuousness, Keats's sensuousness. To what effect, what you use it is a different matter. And so, when Aurobindo writes about these things, it is absolutely sensuous. You feel that as he describes it, your senses are looking at nature and taking it in. I just want to read briefly a description of spring on page 351, about 12, 14 lines from the bottom. Those of you who are interested also in reading at your own free time a description of the rainy season, which I said was Aurobindo's favorite along with the spring season, that's you find in page 349, about 8 lines from the bottom of the page, where you have next through its fiery swoon or clotted knot, rain tide burst in upon torn wings of heat, which begins there and ends on the last line of page 350, or only the muddy creep of sinking flood, or only a whisper and green toss of trees. That's where the description of rainy season ends. And the spring, I'll just read it without pausing too often and offering any comments. This is on page 351, about 9-10 lines from the bottom. Then spring, an ardent lover, leaped through leaves and caught the earth bride in his eager clasp. You see how he begins. Then spring, he says. Then spring, an ardent lover, leaped through leaves and caught the earth bride in his eager clasp. His advent was a fire of eye-raised hues. His arms were a circle of the arrival of joy. His voice was a call to the transcendent sphere, whose secret touch upon our mortal lives keeps ever new the thrill that made the world, remolds an ancient sweetness to new shapes, and guards intact, unchanged by death and time, the answer of our hearts to nature's charm, and keeps forever new yet still the same, the throb that ever wakes to the old delight, and beauty and rapture and the joy to live. His coming brought the magic and the spell. At his touch, life's tired heart grew glad and young. He made joy a willing prisoner in her breast. His grasp was a young god's upon earth's limbs. Chained by the passion of his divine outbreak, he made her body beautiful with his kiss. Impatient for felicity he came, high fluting with the quail's happy voice, his peacock turban trailing on the trees. His breath was a warm summons to delight. The dense voluptuous azure was his gaze. A soft celestial urge surprised the blood, rich with the instinct of God's sensuous joys. Revealed in beauty, a cadence was abroad, insistent on the rapture thrill in life. Immortal movements touched the fleeting hours. A godlike packed intensity of sense made it a passionate pleasure even to breathe. All sights and voices wove a single charm. The life of the enchanted globe became a storm of sweetness and light and song, a revel of color and of ecstasy, a hymn of rays, a litany of cries. A strain of choral priestly music sang, and swung on the swaying censer of the trees. A sacrifice of perfume filled the hours. Ashokas burned in crimson spots of flame, pure like the breath of an unstained desire. White jasmines haunted the enamored air. Pale mango blossoms fed the liquid voice of the love-maddened quail, and the brown bee muttered in fragrance mid the honey buds. The sunlight was a great god's golden smile. All nature was at beauty's festival. When you have more time, read it at leisure slowly and see how much he has put in this one page. And as I said, this is really a poet's book. People who are in a hurry, we want to finish Savitri, that's our program was finished, not for those people. You go back, read it, savor it, once again come back, read it. This is that kind of a book. Okay, now there is much to be said about the way Savitri's birth, etc. are described, but I guess that will have to wait some other occasion, or maybe your own discovery of this someday. Canto 2 describes Savitri's education, how Savitri educated herself, how she got education through various ways, various means. She learned arts and crafts and sciences and music. All this is described. There is a description of Savitri as she was growing up, and those of us, or those of you who have been ever in the ashram, and those of you who ever came into contact with the mother or who went to the ashram in those days, will see how this description brings back to your mind those days. So it looks as if when Aurobindo was describing this, he had a living example to describe from. I'll just read this. How was Savitri? As Savitri was growing up, on page 363, middle of page 363, a friend and yet too great wholly to know. Everybody felt that the mother was a friend, but yet too great wholly to know, but nobody ever felt they really understood her. She walked in their front towards a greater light. Their leader and queen over their hearts and souls, one close to their bosoms, yet divine and far. Everybody felt, as the mother was in the ashram, everybody felt that when you stood in front of her, she made you feel that nothing mattered to her in this world except you. You were the most important person in this world. And so, many people in the ashram felt they didn't miss their own parents because Everything they used to get from their parents, they used to get from her. Her physical presence was so strong, particularly children. I know the case of a child where I know him, the child is no more a child now, he is in 62, 63 years old now, but I'm talking about the time when he was a child. This is something his sister once told me. It seems the father and the mother and all these brothers and sisters, there were 8, 9 brothers, sisters, they were all going towards the ashram. And this boy, small boy, fell down, something, stumbled and fell down, and the toe got hurt and starts bleeding. Now, when this toe starts, you get bleeding, naturally the tendency is to turn towards the father and the mother, they're just behind you. But this boy straight away started running towards the mother's room. And then he went and complained to her, look mother, I've got this. For him, he communicate even to the child, and the child felt, this was a child of about 4 or 5, that the dearest person to him was the mother. So that was the kind of physical presence she had. And therefore he says, one close to their bosoms, yet divine and far, admiring and amazed, they saw her stride, attempting with a godlike rush and leap, heights for their human stature too remote. In one sense, the mother looked very much like us. She ate food with some of the ashramites. She encouraged people. She was the parade ground, sports ground, distribution of prizes. At the annual sports, she will hold the tape at the finishing line. That was the kind of interest she felt. But people there, he says, yet admired and amazed they saw her stride, attempting with a godlike rush and leap, heights for their human stature too remote, or with a slow, great, many-sided toil, pushing towards aim they hardly could conceive. And the way she brought out the hidden talents in people, ordinary people suddenly found they had great talents for photography. People realized they were great artists, painters, people who had never had these things. And she would encourage them and made them feel they were Picassos or they were great artists. Because that's the way a mother would encourage talent. But many people, of course, misunderstood it and really believed they are Picassos. And even now they are quite surprised the world doesn't regard them as Picassos. How is it mother said I was a Picasso and I am not, nobody recognized me? She didn't say it in so many words. This is a mother's love, trying to bring out the best in you. That was what she was doing. And or with a slow, great, many-sided toil, pushing towards aims they hardly could conceive, yet forced to be the satellites of her sun, they moved unable to forego her light, desiring they clutched at her with outstretched hands, or followed, stumbling in the path she made. I will read a little more. 4, 5 lines later. Some felt with her their souls and thrilled with her. A greatness felt near, yet beyond mind's grasp. To see her was a summons to adore. To see her, he says, was a summons to adore. To be near her drew a high communion's force. So men worship a God too great to know, too high, too vast to wear a limiting shape. They feel a presence and obey a might, adore a love whose rapture invades their breasts, to a divine ardor quickening the heartbeats, a law they follow, greatening heart and life. A few lines later, same page, 3-4 lines from the bottom. All this section is about that, but since we don't have time, I'm just reading a few lines. Some turn to her against their nature's bent, divided between wonder and revolt. Some people wanted to revolt against her, but they just couldn't. Wonder and revolt, drawn by her charm and mastered by her will, possessed by her striving to possess. Impatient subjects, their tied longing hearts, hugging the bonds close of which they most complained. They complained, mother's dictatorship. As I said, this dictatorship, but at the same time, they would give everything they have to be near the mother. Murmured at a yoke they would have wept to lose. Murmured at a yoke they would have wept to lose. The splendid yoke of her beauty and her love. Others pursued her with life's blind desires, and claiming all of her as their lonely own, hastened to engross her sweetness meant for all. There are also events like this. Why do you see, I would like mother's love, mother's consideration, all for me. Why does she give it to other people? People felt complained about it. The mother has wonderful ways of dealing with it. This is not the time to go into it because this is not about the mother. But this passage is here. Savitri's growing up in her father's house reminds you. It looks, to me at least, Aurobindo had a living model, whom he describes. And mother's ways were so unusual. I'll just mention one incident. This is fairly well known. There was a Parsi lady who had just moved from Bombay to the ashram. She became an ashramite. And once she became an ashramite, of course, all the whatever facilities the ashram was able to provide were provided to her: a room, a servant, vase of flowers every day, all these things. So 1 month after she had settled in Pondicherry, she once came to see the mother. And the mother said, "Are you comfortable? Are you have everything you need?" She said, "Mother, I am very happy here, very comfortable, except that I have one problem." What is that problem? She thought mother would probably get angry with her or reprimand her or give her a long lecture or whatever. She said, "I have lived in Bombay for all these years and have gotten addicted to tea." "Don't you get tea in the ashram?" She said, "We do get, but not enough. I get only 2 cups of tea, but I am used to drinking 7-8 cups of tea every day. And I am ashamed to admit I am so dependent on tea, so addicted to tea." Mother said, "Is that so?" "Yes." "Wait for a minute." So she went inside. And when she came out, she brought a most exquisite looking tin of tea, which was export model. Somebody had brought it in Paris and sent her. So she said, "Take this." This lady's surprise was no end. She said, "I am saying I am addicted to tea, and mother is giving her another, very exquisitely packed tin of tea, instead of saying, 'Look, tea is not good, there is tannin in it, it affects your liver.' This is the normal lecture we all give." But she didn't do any of these things. She just gave this little tin. And this Parsi lady writes, she took it home and said the tin was so beautiful, and particularly the gift from the mother. She said, "When do I open it? I can't open it for an ordinary occasion. I must open it for a real good occasion. Maybe I'll wait until my birthday comes." So on my birthday I'll open it. Her birthday came. She said, "No, my birthday is not such a big event. I must wait for mother's birthday to come." So waited for the mother's birthday. He said, "No, maybe I should wait a little longer. Even something greater than that, more significant than that." And in this process, suddenly she realized all her desire for tea had just vanished. That is, that was her way of helping people, not reprimanding, not, There are many, many people in the ashram, even today. Those of you who know the ashram know there are some people who are misusing whatever place they have been given by the mother. But mother knew this. But mother's way of working on people was different. See, mother was at the head of the ashram. If she got angry with you, if she reprimanded you, you would of course listen to her. But that won't basically change you. See, people are in the ashram for transformation of their nature. And transformation of the nature has to come from within. It's not something you can impose from outside. I told you the other day the story of a lazy man, remember? That he always went to the ashram very late, he went to the dining room. And did I tell you the story somewhere? No. Huh? I did tell. This is the story of a lazy man. He would always go to the ashram very late, dining room. In the ashram dining room closes at 12:30 because all the sadhaks who work in the dining room have other things to do. They have their own pursuits. They read, they write, they do everything. So it's not a restaurant where, you just wait for customers. And this chap would always go half an hour late. Not only would he go half an hour late, but quarrel with the staff. Don't you know I come late? Can't you keep, looking after 1,500 people? Can't you just take care of one person? They finally went and complained to Sri Aurobindo, this man has become a nuisance. He has made a habit of coming late. Not only does he come late, but he creates all this racket. Sri Aurobindo said, if he comes late like that, why don't you supply food to him in a food carrier? So, from the next day, people would take food in a carrier and knock at the door, but he would so lazy he won't even come and open the door. And even hurl abuses at them. And he is a Bihari, Bihari abuses, Salam, ye karte hain, wo karte hain, they don't wait for my convenience. So these people said, sir, you said take his food to his residence. We take it in a carrier, but this is what he is doing. He said, from today, tomorrow, you take an iron hook, attach it to the handle somewhere and place it there and knock at the door once and announce that your food can come away. Now, laziness. You see, this example, this man was admitted to the ashram, among other things, as a prime example of laziness. Now, why would Sri Aurobindo and the mother welcome such a man in the ashram? The reason is laziness is one of the things you find in all human beings. Now, laziness, while it is in the form as laziness is very bad and must be avoided, laziness has the potential, if it is spiritually transformed, laziness has the potential of becoming solid peace. In fact, it's a perversion of a spiritual quality. Now, the ordinary treatment would be, if you are lazy, all right, from tomorrow, you have, as they do in the army, you hold a rifle and go around the camp, 3 times, 4 times. This is the punishment for laziness. But when he goes around doing this, he will always abusing, cursing everybody. He is not convinced that he has to change. But it is such people that were taken into the ashram. The ashram, the difference between Sri Aurobindo's ashram and ordinary ashram. In ordinary ashram, saints are welcomed. Now, if already saints are welcomed, what is there for them to learn in the ashram? They are already saints. It's like some of the missionary schools in India. Their students always get A division. Why? Because they only take students from very wealthy, educated homes, where therefore parents do the tuition. Teachers don't have to do anything. Automatically they will be A division. So, if in the ashram you only take saints and people who have reached there, that's one kind of an ashram. Sri Aurobindo's ashram was a laboratory. And very often people who were taken in the ashram were taken because they were excellent samples of some human weakness. Along with good things, we also have weakness. And Sri Aurobindo, the mother, tried to bring about a transformation. And some of these weaknesses, you will be quite surprised, are great intellectual power. ultimately the intellect also has to be submitted to the divine. Intellect is a very wonderful thing. But in this total endeavor of sadhana, the intellect also has to be submitted to the divine. But there are some people who refuse to do it because they have something very rare which no ordinary human beings have. Such people were admitted because they were a very good example, very good sample. Similarly, people who have anger, people who have greed, all these samples you find. And therefore, mother used to say to other people, don't talk to me about the weaknesses of your fellow sadhaks. I know all about them. They are here, unlike in ordinary other ashrams. They are here not because they are saints, they are here because there is something in them that wants to change, that wants to be transformed. And this yoga is meant to transform humanity. It's not a yoga that will all make you, from saints to better saints, but to transform them. So this was the idea, this was the way mother treated people. And therefore, once you were, when people went to see the mother, we all know what complex beings we are. We may have many good things, but we all have many bad things as well. And we would always be worried when mother looks at me deep into my eyes, she would immediately see what golmaal I have done in life. So people would feel very nervous about it. Mother used to say, I look into people's eyes to locate where his soul is. And I try to give it a push, come to the front. I am not concerned with your past, I am not concerned with your mistakes. We all have them, human beings have them, that's why you are here, otherwise they would have been there. And so her entire treatment, her entire way of looking at people was different. You can't find an ashram where there is greater freedom than in Pondicherry. The only restrictions are, at one time, even though the restrictions have gone away now, your dining room timings. You have come to the dining room at the times that they have announced. 3 meals, breakfast, lunch and dinner. And the other restrictions were, of course, whether you had to come to meditation or don't come to meditation, go to the samadhi, don't go to samadhi, is not at all. And people generally who are healthy were required to do 8 hours work, because ashram is a community and everybody has to work. So there was 8 hours work. But people who were indifferent to work also were there. So this is a different kind of an ashram. In fact, when 1926, the ashram was about to be established, when Aurobindo, after his great siddhi, decided to withdraw for concentrated work in seclusion, mother was brought to the front and she was announced as the guru of the ashram. Aurobindo hesitated for 2 full days whether to call it an ashram or not, because ashram has a different implication in India. Ashram is a place where you go to see, people merged in meditation, people who are doing things, but this is an ashram where boys and girls play together. This is an ashram where girls used to ride bicycles. That was scandalous in whole Tamil Nadu. So what kind of an ashram is it where girls go on cycles? Now in Tamil Nadu, every village you go, girls are on cycles. If nothing else, the ashram being in Pondicherry has done this wonder to Tamil Nadu. And boys and girls used to compete together in running race, this, that, and the other. So all this, people were amazed. There was a great Vedic scholar, Maharashtrian, called Satwalekar. He has written books on the Vedas and so on. He went there at the age of 90. Somebody took him there and he spent there maybe 8-10 days. And then people asked, what do you think of this? He says, I just couldn't believe that a Vedic ashram like this could even exist in the 20th century. The ideals were totally different in Pondicherry. And of course, the mother and Aurobindo are not in their body now. And yet, as you can see, with all the freedom people enjoy, and a community of 2,500 people living there, the ashram is still going on. That itself is a minor miracle. And so the central secret to it was mother's way of working, mother's way of relating herself to various people in the ashram. All kinds of activities began. Mother wanted a swimming pool. People said, what is it in ashram? People don't go for swimming. In ashram, people go for meditation. Why do you need a swimming pool? Mother said, not only a swimming pool, I want an Olympic-sized swimming pool. Because whatever activity you undertake, it has to be perfect. They wanted a guest house. Now, guest houses can easily be built. You need some 4 walls and you need a little roof. That's a guest house. No, she built Golkand. When Golkand was built, even today there is a guest house in the ashram called Golkand. If you ever go to Golkand, the time it was built, it was regarded as a contribution to architecture. It has collapsible walls and so on. Now, why do this? That is the mother's attitude. You always do things such that you bring a new perfection to every activity. This was their attitude. This was the way the ashram was built. And people were quite surprised at one time ashram was in such great financial straits, and yet she never compromised on these things. The best thing, the most beautiful thing has to be done. Everything has to be done. So that is an ashram. I say this because people have, as soon as you say ashram, a totally different idea. Say, what time do you have to get up in the ashram? This is the first question you ask. What time do you have to go to meditation? There is none of these things. There is nobody supervise you, nobody to breathe down your neck and say, did you do that, did you not do that? Your absolute freedom. The assumption is you choose to come to the ashram because you have decided to dedicate your life to the divine. Mother writes somewhere that in my life as I was growing up, I met many people who say, we would have gladly devoted our entire life to the pursuit of a spiritual ideal, but there is this tremendous problem of earning a living. So I always dreamt of a place where this responsibility will be taken away from people. So people will be given full opportunity, 24 hours, you have nothing to do but seek the divine. And I wanted to build such an institution, and ashram is such an institution. The point I am trying to make is, like Sri Aurobindo's yoga, the ashram also is a different kind of an ashram. The purpose of that is different. The way it is going is different. And as I said, mother is the central throb of the ashram as she was there. Even today, if anything is holding the ashram together, it is basically people's love for mother and Sri Aurobindo. And we often talked about it. There are people who have been brought up in the ashram, who completed the studies in the ashram. They are spread all over Europe and England and so on. They may not even come for any of the satsangs. That doesn't mean they have no devotion to the mother. Even now, they stand out. There is something peculiar about them, something different about them. They may not be, they may not be able to give lectures, or they may not be able to do things. Something in them is different. Some ways they are more honest, more sincere, more simple, and less complicated. All some of these things there are. So the education, the great educational experiment in the ashram, and the whole Europe is now turning towards that kind of an educational experiment, where you will find that in mathematics you are in class 7, in some other subject you are in class 3. Not all subjects are studied at the same level. Some people have a special flair for that subject. So you go as you can progress. You may be in class 4 in English, but you may be something like class 10 in some other subject because you are good at the subject. So there is this flexibility in education. Again, what has to be done in education is the child has to be consulted. Tara in Delhi, Tara Jauhar started a school called Birambika. There, this is the whole central ideal. The child is consulted. Next week's program they are making, there is no set program, there is no set timetable. There are various kinds of activities they have decided, and what you are going to do next week, the child has to say, in consultation with the child, the program, the child doesn't know everything, but the child can indicate. The point is, all the time the child is made to look within, and we always look without. We take guidance from the teacher, we take guidance from the father, we take guidance from him, them, all these things. But ultimately the guidance has to come from within. The child, in that endeavor, The children are likely to make mistakes. But it is better to make mistakes of that kind rather than be all the time guided by somebody. The father says this, grandfather says this, elder brother says this, neighbor says this. What about you? Because this life is after all meant for you to live. There is something within you who wants to live a particular kind of life. And that thing, right from the early days, this was the trend. And the mother started this education, but as you see, we are too small even to understand and implement the great ideals the mother has brought down. But the ideals have been brought down, they have been established. I'm sure slowly in the 21st and 22nd century, education will be different from what it is today. It will be molded along those lines because the advanced thinkers, educational thinkers all over the Western world are now accepting those ideals and implementing them. Don't ask me what is happening to education in India because that will be a different subject. Okay, so this is what I wanted to read out to you, some of these things, talking about the mother. Now we move on from here. Now Savitri is growing up, but on page 367, last 3-4 lines, 5-6-7 lines, the problem is stated very neatly. Admired, unsought, intangible to the grasp, her beauty and flaming strength were seen afar, like lightning playing with the fallen day. People felt this lady was too bright, too glorious, her beauty and flaming strength, and everybody felt this is a glory unapproachably divine. How can we ever claim her hands? How can we ever be her companions? How can we ever her equals? Therefore, no equal heart came close to join her heart. Nobody came, nobody felt they had the inner and outer equipment to be her companions in life. No transient earthly love assailed her calm. No hero passion had the strength to seize. No eyes demanded her replying eyes. Nobody even could look at her. In this sense, a power within her awed the imperfect flesh. The self-protecting genius of our clay divined the goddess in the woman's shape and drew back from a touch beyond its kind the earth nature bound in sense life's narrow make. The hearts of men are amorous of clay kin. Beautifully puts it. Hearts of men are amorous of clay kin. They only want relations with people who are like them, made of clay, made of mud, earth. And bear not spirits lone and high, who bring fire intimations from the depthless plains. If somebody is like Savitri, who brings fire intimations from a deathless plain, we just avoid them, shun them. Too vast for souls not born to mate with heaven. So human beings are small, little human beings. This Savitri was exceptional in every respect. So no companion soul came forward. And then Ashwapati therefore says one day this to her. Ashwapati is in the next canto called to the quest. Like a fond father thinks that his girl is still a child. Most fathers feel, as many of us have been fathers, the one problem with children is that they grow up too fast. Before we know, they have grown up. And so Ashwapati doesn't want to recognize that Savitri has reached an age when she has to step out of her father's house and live her own life. He doesn't understand this, like a fond father, maybe next year, maybe another year, and so on. Then one day he hears this voice, which reminds him that Savitri is not an ordinary daughter born to an ordinary father. She herself is an avatar. She has a destiny far too vast for even Ashwapati to try to comprehend it and imprison it in his house. So there is this beautiful passage, 370, about 4 lines from the top. O force-compelled, fate-driven, earth-born race, O petty adventurers in an infinite world, and prisoners of a dwarf humanity, how long will you tread the circling tracks of mind around your little self and petty things? The voice all of a sudden, wakes you up. He says, O force-compelled, fate-driven, earth-born race, O petty adventurers in an infinite world, and prisoners of a dwarf humanity, how long will you tread the circling tracks of mind like a bullock tied to the oil mill? You go round and round, you run faster and faster. Where are you? You are still going round and round. The same thing, the human mind is like that, around your little self and petty things, but not for a changeless littleness where you meant, not for vain repetition where you built. Out of the immortal substance you were made. Your actions can be swift revealing steps, your life a changeful mold for growing gods. A seer, a strong creator is within. The immaculate grandeur broods upon your days. Almighty powers are shut in nature's cells. A greater destiny waits you in your front. This transient, earthly being, if he wills, can fit his acts to a transcendent scheme. He who now stares at the world with ignorant eyes, hardly from the inconscious night aroused, that look at images and not at truth, can fill those orbs with an immortal sight. Yet shall the Godhead grow within your hearts. You shall awake into the Spirit's air, and feel the breaking walls of mortal mind, and hear the message which left life's heart dumb, and look through nature with sun-gazing lids, and blow your conch shells at the Eternal's gate. Authors of earth's high change, to you it is given to cross the dangerous spaces of the soul, and touch the mighty mother stark awake, and meet the omnipotent in this house of flesh, and make of life the million-bodied one. The earth you tread is a border screened from heaven. The earth you tread, is a beautiful line, is a border screened from heaven. What is it that acts as the screen? Your ignorance, your ego. And then he says, the life you lead conceals the light you are. The life you lead conceals the light you are. Sometimes, if Aurobindo packs so much in one line, someone like me can only throw up his hands in despair and say, this is it, I can't explain anything. He says, life you lead, the life you lead conceals the light you are. You are a light from the heaven. You have God's representative living within you, but we are not even aware of him because of the life we lead. The life we lead conceals the light you are. Immortal powers sweep flaming past your doors. Far off upon your tops the God chant sounds, while to exceed yourself thought's trumpets call, heard by a few, but fewer dare aspire, the nympholepts of the ecstasy and the blaze. An epic of hope and failure breaks earth's heart. Her force and will exceed her form and fate. A goddess in a net of transience caught, self-bound in the pastures of death, she dreams of life. Self-racked with the pains of hell, aspires to joy, and builds to hope her altars of despair, knows that one high step might enfranchise all, and suffering looks for greatness in her sons. But dim in human hearts the ascending fire, the invisible grandeur sits unworshipped there. Man sees the highest in a limiting form, or looks upon a person, hears a name. He turns for little gains to ignorant paths, and kindles his altar lights to a demon fire, to demon face. He loves the ignorance, fathering his pain. A spell is laid upon his glorious strength. He has lost the inner voice that led his thoughts, and masking the oracular tripod seat, a specious idol fills the marble shrine. The great illusion wraps him in its veils. The soul's deep intimations come in vain. In vain is the unending line of seers. The sages ponder in unsubstantial light. The poets lend their voice to outward dreams. A homeless fire inspires the prophet tongues. Heaven's flaming lights descend and back return, because nobody is willing to receive these flaming lights that come from heaven, so they go back. The luminous eye approaches and retires. Eternity speaks. None understands its word. Fate is unwilling, and the abyss denies. The inconscient's mindless waters block all done. Only a little lifted is mind's screen. The wise who know see but one half of truth. The strong climb hardly to a low-peaked height. The hearts that yearn are given 1 hour to love. His tale half told, falters the secret bard. The gods are still too few in mortal forms. This is the voice Ashwapati hears, reminding him that the human enterprise is still an unfinished one. A great new chapter has to be started, and reminding him Savitri has been born to do this job. Well, there are many, many beautiful things here, but before I close, I can't resist myself. I think the tape is almost finished. Dhirubai is sitting back. It doesn't matter. I just want to bring to your notice a beautiful passage. People are talking about mantra. We all want mantras. What is a mantra? The word mantra has been misunderstood, but in our tradition, mantra is supposed to have a great power, great vitalizing power. Mantra is not just any word. Mantra is not just the words of wisdom. Mantra is a word that is packed with the power of the soul. And seers see them and they express them. Gayatri, as you know, most Brahmins at one time believed Gayatri is a mantra which can take you to the highest spiritual realization. The same thing as Ramana. People write books and books of Ramana. 500 pages, 1000 pages, 2000 pages. But except for increase in stationery sale, nothing very much is achieved very often. And yet, it is true that mantra can take you very high. What is the difference? Well, a mantra is not something that is to be taken up and physically engaged with. Your entire being has to be one with that mantra. And how that happens, and when the mantra begins to awaken in you, what happens to you is what Sri Aurobindo describes here. As I said, we have a beautiful passage about meditation. Remember, we read it on the second or the third day. Now this is a beautiful passage about mantra. Since the time at our disposal is limited, I just want to read it with few occasional comments. As when, this is on page 375, now what is the context of it? The context of it is, after Ashwapati hears this voice, say what we just now read, he sees Savitri and says to Savitri this much, page 374, middle of page 374, "Depart where love and destiny call your charm." Page 374, middle of it, middle of that page. "Depart where love and destiny call your charm. Venture through the deep world to find thy mate. For somewhere on the longing breast of earth, thy unknown lover waits for thee, the unknown. Thy soul has strength and needs no other guide than one who burns within thy bosom's sparse." He says, you go out into the open world, your soul will guide you unmistakably to the person who is destined to marry you. This is what that he says. And this, she says, acts as if it were a mantra which goes into the eyes of a yogi. This is the context in which he describes how a mantra normally acts. As when the mantra sinks in yoga's ear, for a mantra to fructify, the ear in which the mantra comes must be the ear of yoga. That is, somebody who has opened himself up to spiritual life sincerely. Yoga simply means a sincere aspirant to spiritual life, not somebody who has just turned to God as many people turn. Yoga is this one single-minded pursuit and quest of the divine, of a higher consciousness. When this happens, what happens first? Its message enters, stirring the blind brain. Many of you probably are Brahmins, or you know the Gayatri mantra, and the translation of it you read. It doesn't amount to a very great deal. Then you read books on Gayatri by Chinmayananda, this Swamiji, that Swamiji, you read all these things. There are big books, fat books, thin books. And yet, it doesn't become very clear to you. You don't understand why people have said that with the help of Gayatri you can have the highest illumination. What is it? It is not the ideas, it's not the thoughts, he says. Its message enters, stirring the blind brain, and keeps in the dim, ignorant cells its sound. There are two things about a mantra. One is its diction, its meaning. The second important thing is its sound. This mantra, therefore a mantra cannot be translated. You cannot translate Gayatri into Gujarati. Gayatri has to be in Sanskrit. So there is no translation of mantra. You can give the meaning in another language, but the mantric effect can only work through that language in which the original Rishi had seen it. And so he says it has two things. One is its message, the meaning, enters your brain, creates a stir there, but you don't really see what it's all about. But if you keep repeating it, then the sound body of the mantra begins to leave an impression on your physical structure in the very body. Your physical body responds to the rhythm of this mantra and keeps in the dim, ignorant cells its sound. The hearer understands a form of words. What is Gayatri? Gayatri is a prayer to the highest effulgent expression here of the divine, which is the sun, asking him to illumine your thee, illumine your mind, flood it with your light. That's what it is asking. Now that is, of course, a great aspiration, great prayer, but what makes it powerful? Then he says, and keeps in the dim, ignorant cells its sound, the hearer understands a form of words, and musing on the index thought it holds, he strives to read it with the laboring mind. The first attempt we make is try to understand it with our mind, with our intelligence, but finds bright hints, not the embodied truth. As long as you keep grappling with it with your mind, you find the hints, there must be something in it, but what exactly it is, you can't understand. Then, after your surface being has grappled with it, understood its meaning, prose meaning, all associations, why the sun, the highest effulgent body here, what is the significance of sun. People have written books on these things, but it doesn't take you very far. It only gives you bright hints. The mantra begins to act only when your mind begins to fall silent. So he says, the word then falling silent in himself to know. And this silence also can be brought, created by the mantra. One of the things that the mantra can do, if you sincerely pursue it, it can create a silence in the mind. The Westerners talk about transcendental meditation, TM and so on. What is the secret of it? The secret of it is even when you repeat nonsense syllables, if you do it regularly, associate with your breath, then gradually even this nonsense syllable can quieten your mind. So if you take up the upasana of a mantra and do it regularly with devotion, a time has to come when your surface mind falls silent. And he says, then falling silent in himself to know, he meets the deeper listening of his soul. Once the surface mind falls silent, then you will realize that the chanting of the mantra is taken up by your soul. Something deep within you is receiving the mantra, is chanting the mantra. The word repeats itself in rhythmic strains. Once it has reached that level, you don't have to make any attempt. As you are driving the car and you have allowed your mind some